All right, pre-algebra students, so today we are getting into our lesson about slope and rate of change. This is pretty similar to our work with constant of proportionality. So in this lesson, we should be able to determine the slope of a line using its rise over run on a graph. And in this lesson in particular, we are going to talk about what is slope, types of slope, and finding slope from a graph. Make sure that you're following along with our guided notes, and let's get started. So slope, very similar to constant of proportionality or unit rate, is the rate of change in a relationship. Slope or rate of change is a ratio of the change in the dependent variable, which is our y variable, divided by the change in the independent or x variable. And we can also refer to slope as delta y over delta x. Delta, this triangle here, is the Greek letter for change. Change in y over change in x. It is the same ratio every time. On a graph of a linear relationship, slope describes the steepness or the slant of the line. Steepness or slant. So let's look at some types of slope. So you'll see for each example here, we have a coordinate plane with x and y axis, and there is a line graphed on top of it. So in this top left example, this is an example of a positive slope. A positive slope increases from left to right on a coordinate grid. It's moving up. This is a positive slope. We are climbing. The next example is a negative slope. A negative slope decreases from left to right. This would be kind of like if you're going down a ski slope. The next example, when you have a horizontal or a flat line, would be a zero slope. This number that we're going to use for slope, the ratio, would be equal to 0. And the last example, a vertical line, has what we call an undefined slope. In this particular example, this means that we are rising infinitely, so the change in y could be any number, but we're not moving side to side. We're not changing x, so our change in x would be 0. And we know that we can't divide by 0, so that's why this slope is undefined. Go ahead and take a second to pause this video and try to identify the types of slopes in this diagram. So for line A, notice that it is a flat line. This would be a 0 slope. That means that x is changing infinitely, but y is not changing at all. Line B, well, it looks like we're moving down when we move across the graph left to right. This would be a negative slope. Line C is a vertical line. Vertical lines, as we know, have an undefined slope. And line D is moving up. It's increasing from left to right. This is a positive slope. So go ahead, take a second to think of the patterns you're seeing with these lines and with these slopes, and try to determine what's going to help you understand the difference between undefined and 0 slopes, slopes of vertical and horizontal lines. Next, we want to find slope from a graph. We're going to put numbers to these slopes. So to find the value of slope from a graph, we need to find the ratio. We need to find the ratio of the vertical change, or change in y, compared to the horizontal change. That's going to be our change in x. In other words, we can call this rise over run. Rise means how far up or down we're changing. Run means how far left or right we're changing. Think about rising, like the rising sun moves up and down, and run, like you're running on a track. You're moving from left to right on the horizon. So to do this, to find slope from a graph, you need to choose any 2 points on the graphed line. Then draw a right triangle to count the rise and the run. We always want to simplify our ratios when it's possible to do so. And remember to check if the graph has a positive or a negative slope. So what I mean by saying simplify your ratio, let's say you find a rise over run of 6 over 3. Well, we could reduce that. That would become 2 over 1 or just 2. So let's try this example. We're going to follow the steps to find the slope of this graph. The rise of the graph shown. When I see the rise, that's my change up and down. When I'm moving from this point that's graphed up to this one, the change in y, my rise is 1, 2, 3, 4 points. So my rise is positive 4. My run, my change left to right, would be 1, 2, 3. And since I'm moving to the right, that's a positive 3 change. We moved from 3 to 6. So the slope of the graph is rise over run, 4 over 3. Let's try a couple more examples of finding slope from a graph. You'll see that in this first example, problem 2, I've identified points that I want to find the slope between. But on the next one, we're going to have to identify our own points. So on problem 2, we need to draw our right triangle to find rise over run. So starting at the point on the left, I'm going to rise up until I hit the level of my second point. That is a rise of positive 1. My run, moving from left to right, would be 1, 2, 3, 4. I moved to the right 4. That means my run is positive 4. So my slope, my rise over run, is 1/4. That is the steepness of my line. On number 3, I already can tell I'm going to have a negative slope because it is decreasing as I move left to right across the graph. But now I need to identify 2 points to find the slope between. I'm going to go ahead and choose a point that I can easily identify. I wouldn't want to choose something in the middle of a square on the grid because I can't tell what that point is. I'm going to find points that are directly in the center of the grid marks. So I know here is a coordinate and here is a coordinate. Notice how they're directly within the grid lines. So I'm going to draw a right triangle to find my slope. So moving from my point on the far left, I'm going to move down until I reach the height of my second point. So I'm at 1, 2, 3. Since I'm moving down on the graph, that's a change of -3. My run would be moving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I moved 6 points to the right, so that is a positive 6 change. So my slope would be -3 over positive 6, and I can simplify that. I can reduce that fraction. If I divide the top and the bottom of my fraction by 3, I would get a slope of -1/2. So that would be how to find my slope. For additional practice with this concept, and I highly recommend you practice, try out problems 3 through 7. And that is it for our lesson today. Make sure that you're trying the additional practice problems. This is a really important concept to make sure you have down. Check your answers with my filled in notes in the content library and modules 3 and 4 notes. and ask for support in Math Help Desk if you need it. Have a great day.